The email's subject line glared at me like an old ghost. Mortgage account update, final notice. I was sitting in my office 32 floors above the city, the skyline stretching out like glass and steel confessions. My blouse was silk, pale cream, smooth against my skin, and my espresso sat half-finished beside a stack of contracts I was supposed to review. But my eyes couldn't leave that subject line. I clicked. And there it was. My name. My signature on a mortgage I never signed. My chest tightened. Not with shock. No, not anymore. But with that deep, familiar ache. I had discovered this betrayal years ago, when I was barely 20, raw and wide-eyed, still naive enough to think fathers were supposed to protect their daughters. And worse than the forged papers, worse than the lies, was his reaction. He had laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a guilty one. A full-bodied, dismissive laugh. As though I were a child accusing him of stealing cookies, not a grown woman staring at documents that shackled my name to his debts. Now, 10 years later, I leaned back in my leather chair, crossed one leg over the other, and let the sound of that laugh echo in my memory. It didn't hurt the way it used to. It fueled me. Because what he didn't know, what no one in my family really knew, was who I had become since that day. And soon, they were all going to find out. Back then, I was 20 years old, living at home in a cramped house that always smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and fried onions. My dad liked to say I was lucky. He let me stay rent-free while I figured out my life. I thought I was lucky too, until the letter arrived. It was from the bank. Polite, but firm. Your mortgage account is now past due. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my hands trembling as I read it over and over. My name. My social security number. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. I stormed into the living room where Dad sat slouched in his recliner, TV blaring some game show. Dad? I said, voice shaking. Why is my name on a mortgage? He didn't even look up at first, just smirked, eyes glued to the screen. You're young, he said. Clean credit, figured you could help out. Help out? My throat was dry. You forged my signature. That's when he turned to me, finally meeting my eyes. And then he laughed. A short, sharp bark of amusement. Oh, don't be so dramatic, he said, waving his beer can. You'll thank me one day. House will be yours when I'm gone. I remember the burn in my eyes, the way my hands shook so badly I had to curl them into fists. That's not how this works. You're ruining my life before it even starts. But he just leaned back, still chuckling, as if I were some silly little girl overreacting. That laugh cut deeper than the mortgage itself. Later that night, I sat on my bed staring at the letter, tears blurring the words. That's when my grandmother knocked on my door. She was the only one who ever saw me clearly. She sat beside me, her hands rough but warm, and pressed something into my palm, a small silver locket. Inside was a photo of her younger self, standing proudly in front of the tiny bakery she'd once owned. I built this with nothing, she whispered. Men told me I couldn't. The bank laughed at me. But I did it anyway. Don't let his laugh be the end of your story. That night, I decided, if my own father could laugh at my ruin, I would build a life so untouchable, so undeniable, that one day the laugh would be on him. I left home 2 weeks later with one suitcase, $500, and my grandmother's locket around my neck. At first, it was survival mode. I rented a shoebox apartment with peeling paint and slept on a mattress on the floor. I worked 2 jobs, barista in the mornings, waitress at night, and in between, I studied. Finance, marketing, coding, anything I could get my hands on for free online. It wasn't glamorous. I ate instant noodles more times than I'd admit. I cried in bathroom stalls when tips weren't enough. But every time doubt gnawed at me, I touched that locket and remembered. I was not going to be the girl whose father's laugh defined her. My break came when I met Elaine, a woman in her 50s who ran a small consulting firm. She was sharp-eyed, blunt, and reminded me of my grandmother. One night after my shift, she stayed late at the cafe, watching me manage a chaotic rush with steady hands. "You ever think about doing more with yourself?" she asked. That question changed everything. Elaine took me under her wing, teaching me not just business but confidence. She pushed me into rooms I didn't feel ready for, vouched for me when others doubted. With her guidance, I landed my first real client, a struggling startup desperate for someone who understood social media. I worked day and night, pouring every ounce of myself into making them succeed. When their revenue doubled, word spread. More clients came. Soon, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I built a company quietly, carefully, never flaunting my wins. My social media showed only modest updates, nothing that would hint at the empire I was building behind the scenes. My family thought I was just getting by, and I let them, because I wanted the reveal to come on my terms. It happened sooner than I expected. One humid summer afternoon, I got a call, my father's voice on the other end, gravelly and strained. "We need to talk," he said. When he and the rest of my family arrived at my office, they looked out of place. Worn jeans, tired faces, shuffling awkwardly in the sleek marble lobby. They expected a cubicle, maybe a cramped little office. What they walked into was my world. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wooden desks, abstract art lining the walls, awards gleaming on shelves, a quiet buzz of assistants moving efficiently. And me, seated behind a mahogany desk, silk blouse gleaming in the light, the silver locket resting just visible against my collarbone. They froze. "This is yours?" my mother whispered. I let the silence stretch, their eyes darting across the room, taking it all in. Finally, I smiled, calm, composed, untouchable. "Yes," I said. "All mine." The shock on their faces was almost satisfying enough, but then I leaned forward, clasping my hands. "So," I said, voice steady, "what brings you here?" That's when it spilled out. They were drowning. The mortgage, the very one my father had signed in my name, was collapsing. They needed help. They needed me. And for the first time, I watched the man who once laughed at my pain squirm in silence. I could have said no. Part of me wanted to. But as I looked at their desperate faces, I realized something. True power wasn't revenge. True power was control. And now, I had it. "I'll help," I said slowly, but on my terms. Their eyes lit up with relief. But then I laid down the conditions. "To you, Mom, therapy. You've ignored your own dreams for too long, burying yourself in his chaos. You want my help? You start healing." She nodded, tears brimming. "To you, Dad." I paused, letting the weight settle. He couldn't meet my eyes. "You apologize. For the mortgage. For laughing. For treating me like I was nothing. And if you ever use my name without my permission again, you won't just lose my help. You'll lose me." The room went still. For once, he didn't laugh. His shoulders sagged and he muttered, "I'm sorry." "And to the rest of you," I continued, "no more pretending I'm still that helpless girl. You treat me with respect, or you don't get access to me at all." I wasn't cruel. My voice was steady, almost gentle, but the firmness was undeniable. They knew the balance of power had shifted forever. Over the next months, I watched changes unfold. My mother started therapy. My siblings pursued dreams they'd once buried. Even my father begrudgingly treated me with a new kind of respect, the laughter gone, replaced by silence when I spoke. And me? I finally let myself breathe. One evening, I stood by my office window, the city lights glittering like 1,000 possibilities. I held my grandmother's locket in my palm, thumb tracing the worn edges. Her words echoed in me still. Don't let his laugh be the end of your story. It hadn't been. The laugh that once haunted me had become my fuel. And now, when I thought of it, I didn't feel pain. I felt power. I smiled softly, closing the locket. My dad signed my name on a mortgage. I whispered to the glass, my voice steady, strong, unshakable. Then he laughed when I found out. But in the end, I had the last laugh.